WIthology is about the stories behind success. Join host Brian Tierney, CEO of Brian Communications, as he interviews successful industry leaders to hear the fascinating stories about their personal journeys and the people who have helped them get to where they are today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to WIthology. I'm Brian Tierney, CEO of Brian Communications, and I'm really looking forward to my conversation with today's guest, David Baiada. David is the Chief Executive Officer of Bayada Home Health Care, one of the largest and most trusted leaders in home health care. 33,000 employees, Bayada Home Health Care operates in 22 states and 5 countries, and just last year served over 168,000 clients, in fact, 30,000 a week, 370 offices. David, thank you for joining me today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. David, let's start at the beginning. Your grandmother immigrated from Serbia and your great-grandparents came from Sicily in Italy. And I know family plays such a large part in shaping who you are today and the company itself. Tell me a little bit about some of these values that your grandparents and great-grandparents instilled in your family that have guided you and your father and mother and everyone through along your lives.
Yeah, I think 2 that come to mind in particular are hard work and entrepreneurship that find their way into my life, into my family's life, and clearly into the role our organization plays in the community. We were always taught, much like a kind of cliche immigrant mentality, that hard work is the most important ingredient to getting ahead in life and to finding a path and creating a path. And then entrepreneurship, we have a family of entrepreneurs. Obviously, my dad, who started our business, Bayada Home Health Care, but he has siblings that are entrepreneurs. His father was an entrepreneur. His uncles were entrepreneurs in one form or another, whether it was the local barber shop in South Jersey where the family immigrated to, my grandfather, an insurance agency, a technology business, obviously our healthcare business. So hard work and entrepreneurship are 2 of the values that really come to mind that emanate from my grandparents and great-grandparents that immigrated to the U.S.
One of the great lines, I think it was Thomas Edison who said, opportunity comes into many lives. It's wearing overalls, though, and you don't recognize it. And your father started the company back in 1975. He had saved up $16,000. In 2023, the last numbers that were out there, you did $1.2 billion. Amazing growth over the last now going on 50 years. Let's talk about your early career. Before you began working at Bayada, did you know you wanted to be in healthcare? What was your thinking?
No, not at all. I was interested and curious about entrepreneurship, was interested in technology, was interested in the role of building businesses, but really had absolutely no interest, or it really never even crossed my mind to get involved in our family business. For those that have a parent that is or was a small business owner, that's really what it was like. I had relationships with many of the people at Bayada Home Health Care just by nature of being a kid growing up around a small business. And my grandmother was a client, lived with us and received healthcare services at home for many years. But I, as a kid, wasn't paying too close attention to it all and was interested in doing my own thing and went into management consulting after studying economics and computer science. And, as a management consultant, learned a lot and had an amazing opportunity to work with really smart people, helping all different types of companies solve complex problems. And then one day was interested in a career change and thought, you know what, maybe now that I'm a minted 26-year-old expert in business, maybe I'll consider joining the family business as a career change. And that's what I did.
It seems like in so many of the most successful family businesses, if you will, it's that sort of a thing where somebody worked somewhere else for 4 or 5 years and then makes the decision, you know what, okay, maybe I am interested in what I grew up with and kind of in the background of things. I also think about people like Brian Roberts, who started out first in the, quote, family business in a different era for Comcast, but he was working installing cable and telephone wires when he first got out of school too. The heart of Withology is the idea that none of our successes are built solo. They're all built on team. It's Withology. That's why great things happen. If you could talk a little bit about the mentors that you had in your life. I love your dad's story about Kermit the Frog, but let's talk a little bit first about your mentors and those who helped kind of make you who you are today.
Sure. I think first and most important, when I got to Bayada, there was a handful of people that really went out of their way to help me learn and establish gaining experience and confidence and credibility. And those are some people that I knew before that were kind of a part of our founding history. My dad, included as one of them. But for the most part, I was really empowered to start in an entry level role and, like anybody else, establish a track record of success and earn the right to take on more responsibility over time. And in doing that, I'd say that the most important mentors were the people in our branch locations, the nurses and aides that I worked with and recruited and collaborated with to provide services every day were the most important teachers. In a service business, every single customer interaction is different and is a really important learning experience. It contributes to an understanding and a degree of expertise and that informs progress and performance over time. And so each and every one of those experiences was like a mentoring exercise, and I feel really grateful to have had the opportunity to work on the front line and really engage and collaborate with all those incredible people that are doing the work every day as critical mentors to help inform that this is something that's really meaningful and important to me. The work that we do gives me energy, and it's something where I can find fulfillment and joy and make a difference. But also help me learn and develop and evolve and grow as a leader, as an entrepreneur, and help pave the way for a career progression that now 20 some years later, has evolved in so many important ways.
Yeah, understanding too that there's a sophistication and there's science to what your business is about, but it is about personal service. It's personal interaction every single moment. Early on, when I was a little boy, I was a bus boy, and I learned a lot when I was 14 to 17 years old doing that, because you realize, if you hustle and you're serving people and everybody's happy and the waitresses are happy at the end of the night too, they thank you and give you an extra tip. So you kind of are able to do that. But understanding that is hard. And talk about Kermit the Frog and your dad's analogies for that and that storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, so when the Muppet movie was released, the character of Kermit the Frog, I think, was something that really resonated with my dad in a way that Kermit, like he, kind of had a big vision. Kermit's was to make it to Hollywood. My dad's was really to build a meaningful business that provided services coast to coast. In the beginning, it was how can we have 100 locations coast to coast? And so starting with big vision, then Kermit also was very focused on finding and connecting with and building a community of like-minded people that were similarly energized and inspired by the big vision. And so in the movie, he has the bus and finds his way across the country and meets all these interesting people and overcomes all of these interesting challenges along the way. And I think as an entrepreneur, my dad felt similarly. And so Kermit and the Muppets in general just became this metaphor for our journey as an organization and as entrepreneurs, and has really been part of our story for 50 years. And now, just in 2 weeks from now, coming up on our 50th anniversary, we'll continue to reflect on our path to Hollywood, just like Kermit did.
I think there's something very unique about the culture of your company, starting with your father and your family, but that would be comfortable talking about Kermit the Frog. And because it brings a smile to everybody's face, I'm sure internally, as well as I know it does for me, to hear that. I mean, it's like, gotcha. Oh man. Okay. I can totally see that's the Bayada family culture, that sense of innocence and sophistication. And also like you can relate to it too when it's Kermit the Frog. I'm sure when you're talking internally, it's kind of people nod and smile too.
Yeah. And one thing about Kermit that I think is also emblematic of our culture and just kind of the ethos of my dad as an entrepreneur as well is a bit of vulnerability. If you rewatch the movie and Kermit on the lily pad reflecting on within a vulnerable way about like what it takes to get from here to wherever you want to go. And I think as an entrepreneur, there's a sense of fear and desire and anxiety that motivates entrepreneurs to be successful. And like Kermit, I think my dad felt that too. And it's been part of our entrepreneurial story all along the way, because as a branch-based business, each leader of our almost 400 locations around the world is their own version of a Kermit-like entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
They feel and have the responsibility, but also I think grapple with the vulnerability and of finding success and doing a good job and getting to Hollywood per se.
Yeah. I mean, you have, like, when you think about it, you have 400 leaders, and the values that they take to that position are going to make or break. And you've done it so well over the years too. It's amazing. Yeah. One of the things that really blew me away is when I read about a couple of years ago, the decision to become a nonprofit. I mean, private equity is running it, throwing tons of money. There's incredible consolidation in your industry as well. And you all decided to go a different route. And tell me a little bit about it, about that transition and moving from for-profit to non-for-profit.
Sure. The story really starts in earnest about 25 years ago or so when we decided to write down and codify who we are and what we stand for in the form of mission, vision, values, and beliefs in a document we call the Bayada Way. And in the Bayada Way, we there's a phrase that talks about long-term vision and our desire to leave a lasting legacy. And when we wrote that down, I think it instigated or catalyzed a lot of reflection on what does legacy really mean, and what do we want our legacy? What does Mark, my dad, want his legacy to be? What do we as a family want our legacy to be? And what's the business's legacy? Over the course of years, I think we arrived on a common point of view that our first priority as it relates to our legacy was to ensure that we build an institution of lasting value, that we build a company that can thrive for 100 years and beyond and continue to grow and adapt and innovate and be a meaningful provider of important services in every community that we serve, hopefully more and more of them over time. And so when you put a stake in the ground that your first priority is to build a 100-year company, and that means above personal financial gain, it means above anything other than organizational sustainability and success. It invites like an academic exercise. They go like, how do you build an ownership and governance structure that maximizes the likelihood that the company will last? And when you look around, there aren't that many 100-year companies. And there's nothing wrong with private equity and private investors, but their time horizons tend to be 5 to 7 years, not 100 plus. And so, just by nature of our long-term orientation, our core objectives are out of sync with lots of different ownership structures. And so, if you look around, most of the examples of 100-year companies aren't family businesses. They tend to fail by the third generation. They aren't certainly investor-backed organizations. It's the hospital and the university and the other, not-for-profit institution in your community. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. And it's not perfect. There are lots of things that still have to be done to maximize success over time. But we decided that if our first priority is to build a 100-year company, then not-for-profit was the ownership structure that we thought would maximize the likelihood of that success.
And that must be really a differentiating point when you're recruiting new people too, right? I mean, new talent, people who are looking at that and thinking, this is my sense of mission, why I'm in healthcare, why I want to be in these various areas of serving.
Yeah, I think that we have always been a values-based, long-term oriented company. And so our ethos has been consistent, but the decision to convert to not-for-profit, I think, is perceived accurately as putting our money where our mouth is, and that it's not lip service. We gave a company away in the spirit of a 100-year objective. And that, I think, has proven to be really meaningful to the right type of people, the people that are drawn to that type of long-term orientation. At the same time, I think what really brings the magic to life is this intersection between that long-term purpose driven orientation and then an entrepreneurial like competitiveness and results orientation. And so we are very careful about curating the balance between purpose and performance, because ultimately they both matter. You can be a not-for-profit organization that's very purpose-centric, but if you don't get results, you're not going to last.
Right.
On the flip side, you can be incredibly results-oriented, but if you don't have a sense of purpose, then the culture will deteriorate over time, and 100-year sustainability also becomes elusive. And so it's the intersection of the two that we think is what's going to empower our ability to build a 100-year legacy.
That is a critical point, isn't it? It's not just it's the two together. Talk a little bit for a second about how day to day, how you build up those sorts of things, that, this combination.
Yeah, sure. I think so on the purpose side, we are very thoughtful and deliberate about how we curate a values-based culture. And it starts with some very simple and obvious efforts to clarify it in writing. What do we stand for? And what are the behaviors that are evidence of our values in our day-to-day work? And this is not stuff that sits on a conference room wall. This is a document and a set of rituals and traditions that then reinforce those values and behaviors in our everyday rhythm. And so, like many institutions that have vibrant cultures that last a long time, we use ritual and tradition and then training and recognition to celebrate, teach, reinforce, and create an environment that continues to repetitively highlight what are the things that make us values based in our day to day behavior. And then on the performance side, we also tie all of our management systems and performance management, performance measurement back to the values. And so a balanced scorecard that highlights and recognizes and reinforces the results that are also evidence of our values in our day to day work and are deeply connected to that in a concrete way. And so that hopefully people are hearing then about on every single day about what are the behaviors that are evidence of our values and what are the results that are evidence of our values. And the two together are the way in which we are curating that balance between purpose and performance.
In our prior conversations, when you touched before about this idea of ritual and traditions and things that last hundreds and hundreds of years, whether they be the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, organized religions, the Army, the Navy, things like this, that they evolve all the time, but at the same time, they value ritual and tradition. Can you talk a little bit about like an example of something like that that you do at Bayada or how you implement that?
Sure. My favorite example is what we call key action of the week. And so in the Bayada Way document, within each of our three values, compassion, excellence, and reliability, there are 5 behavioral expectations that are more specific expression of the behaviors that demonstrate alignment with the value. And so what we do is every Thursday morning, every team in the company, everywhere in the world, spends 15 minutes sitting in a circle reflecting on one of those 15 key actions. And that reflection is curated through an email that gets distributed to every manager or every team leader, and it uses storytelling and conversation starters to enable each team leader to facilitate a conversation for 15 minutes about what is listening closely, showing empathy, and responding to the needs of our clients, which is in the value of compassion. What does that key action really mean, and how does it show up, and what are examples that come to mind, or who are people that have demonstrated that we want to recognize? That like reflection exercise is just 15 minutes, subtle, simple, but really powerful because it A is safe space to reflect on what does this value really mean in the work that we do every day. B, people know that there's hundreds of other Bayada teams sitting in a circle just like them,
Right.
having a very similar conversation. So it gives people a sense of connection to something even bigger than themselves and their individual teams. And C, it gives us a channel to constantly and repetitively recognize and celebrate what good looks like and when it's happening so that people can connect with it and draw energy from it in a positive way.
I think that's just so amazing, David. I got to tell you, it's so, unique. I mean, people, lots of times our mission values, like as you touched on, are on a wall. You see them in the lobby and that's about it. And occasionally spoken about, but to do it every day as kind of a practice drill and to celebrate it and to know that you're doing it here and they're doing it at hundreds of other places around the world. That is really super unique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, we didn't invent it. One of our, kind of entrepreneurial rules of thumb is to copy things that work
Mm-hmm.
rather than invent them. And as you referenced before, military institutions, organized religions, the Boy Scouts, there's so many great examples of ritual and tradition that reinforce values, right? The Boy Scouts, the patches are tied to the values.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so when you achieve a certain milestone and you get that patch, you are now like inculcating a value system in a unique ritualized way that is really impactful and it works. It
Yeah.
works. It's like, how many people can reflect on that experience as a child? And so you take that and apply it. There's so many other great examples out there that we just try and borrow from and emulate and apply to our circumstances.
One of the things I find fascinating too is the way that you guys have grown again from $16,000 that your father had saved in 1975, and now, not just in the U.S. but around the world. Talk about some of that international growth and seizing opportunities. And you mentioned to me at one point, there's a lot of structure that goes around it, but a lot of it is seeing an opportunity to maybe go into X country, and that's when you went into that particular country. Talk a little bit about that if you could.
Yeah,
The global growth.
I think if you tie this back to Kermit, the idea of a big, bold vision to get to Hollywood really started with 100 locations coast to coast. But, my dad is not short of big ideas. And I think over time, it became, well, why not worldwide? And I think early on, and really probably still, most of our international experience has been opportunistic, where we got introduced to someone or, had a relationship that led to an opportunity in a particular country. And, it's been a great learning experience where I think the most powerful takeaway has been something that seems so obvious, which is that the desire to be cared for at home is a global need. It bridges every culture. It is not an American preference. And I think in many ways, providing service in Germany versus India is not any more similar or different than providing services in Germany and in Georgia and Indiana.
Really?
They're different systems, they're different payment sources, they're different rules, different challenges. But at the end of the day, when you walk into a house in Germany or South Korea or New Zealand, and you sit on the couch of a client and talk to them and their family about what's important to them, it is exactly the same as when you walk into a house anywhere here in the United States and sit on their couch. They want to be listened to, they want to be cared for, they want to feel a sense of safety and independence at home. And we see an opportunity, especially over a 100-year time horizon, to do that in so many more places than just the 50 states in the US.
When you say it, it immediately resonates that, yeah, it's my mom or my dad, and there's vulnerability, and I want to stay at home, and I want somebody who's loving, who's going to come here, who really knows what they're doing too, which is what you guys are delivering every day in those countries. When we did the Health Key Focus session a few months ago, we talked a little bit about some of the emerging trends in your industry. Can you talk a little bit about that, like as you sit here in the beginning of 2025, what you're seeing as you go ahead?
Sure thing. So we're a provider of in-home healthcare services. We operate in 7 different segments, 7 different types of services to different age groups or demographics with different types of payment sources, government versus private, et cetera. In each of the 7, there's all kinds of interesting, specific and unique themes and challenges and opportunities, but there's some big meta themes that I think apply across all of community-based and home-based care delivery. And the first is unlimited demand, effectively unlimited demand through, well-publicized, aging population, other demographic trends, societal preference, cost pressure of institutional care and hospital care. People want and prefer to be cared for at home, and it is the highest quality, lowest cost setting. So everything points to continued need and preference for care in the home. Big meta theme number 1. Meta theme number 2 is that the number of people that need the service or want the service at home is growing materially faster than the number of people available to provide it. And so in the nursing labor market or the home health aide and caregiver labor market, there is an increasing disparity between the unlimited demand and the available supply. And so that puts all kinds of pressure on our ability to deliver against what people want. And so today, for example, on average, across all of our different 7 services, we turn away about 1 out of every 2 phone calls for service because of inadequate workforce to provide the service. Big meta theme that has geographic sort of differences, but pretty consistent thematically. And for the foreseeable future, doesn't really look like it's going to change. And then the third is that there's no money. Healthcare is already 20% of GDP. the amount of money available to fund and provide these services, any services in healthcare, is capped, effectively capped. We can't continue on an unsustainable spending path for healthcare in the United States. And so how and where policy shifts and societal shifts empower a mechanism to continue to create high quality healthcare at a lower total cost is a gigantic meta theme. And so each and every day we're navigating the intersection of these three themes, trying to figure out how to establish ourselves as a high quality, low cost provider of services to compete and differentiate in the market, but also a high quality employer to compete and differentiate in the labor market so that we can serve that demand as best we can.
And talk roles of things like AI, opportunities there, I guess, in terms of things. But at the same time, you're dealing with an older population in many situations, or people who have certain challenges too, as well. So you're trying to balance.
We see a few different sort of categories of application for AI, and probably there's a time horizon to each of them. And this isn't our thinking, kind of borrow it from what's happening in the marketplace and in other industries as well. There's sort of all of the obvious productivity opportunity, getting more efficient, providing more consistent, higher productivity levels for back office processes, for example. And then, so all of that kind of analytical, what would be called automation oriented AI. Then there's all this stuff that's more customer facing, right? How do you create a more consistent, higher quality experience using automation and bots to engage the client and their family and engage our other stakeholders like hospital case managers, physicians that we partner with. And then the longer term stuff is, I think, a little bit more controversial, but I think inevitable, which is robotics. I've seen demonstrations of AI powered robots that do basic activities of daily living, light housekeeping, meal preparation, et cetera. These are things like Jetsons style transformation that I think to all of us, we've always perceived that like that will never actually happen in our lifetime. I will guarantee you that this will happen in our lifetime. I've seen them. It is an absolute certainty, in my opinion, that we will see versions of caregiving AI robots available to consumers in our lifetime. And I think when you combine the fact that there's unlimited demand and not enough people to provide the service, we have to find other options. And I think the market forces will push us to really address these controversial opportunities to make a difference through AI and robotics.
You're touching on that actual fact is there are more people needing the services as we get older. You're seeing that here as well as in these other countries that you're working in so much.
No doubt. Obviously each country has its own nuances and cultural differences around caregiving. Family-based caregivers versus professional caregivers are all a little different. But I think particularly in countries with an aging population like Japan and Italy and others, these basic themes are pretty consistent.
Right. Well, David, thank you so much. What was started by your father back in 1975 when he saved $16,000 and had a dream. And now here we are 50 years later and well over $1 billion in revenue in US and 5 other countries and hundreds of offices and all of these things in technology. But it all comes back to a mantra that I've heard you say and your father say, think big, work hard, and show love. I mean, gorgeous, man. Love it. Thank you so much, David, for being part of WIthology this week. Thank you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.